The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome to the Amber Mac Show. In this week's episode, I'm going to share some of the top tech to keep your house running smoothly this September. And speaking of artificial intelligence, which is always top of mind, we've talked about Canada's AI past, but today we're going to talk about the challenge of sovereign AI. Plus, the White House is now on TikTok, Jeff. So we're going to chat about what exactly that means.
Yeah, that came out of left field a little bit, and it's going to be a packed show. In my segment this week for the other Mac, I'm going to talk about AI's energy consumption and pollution and how it's going a little bit off the rails. Plus, we'll discuss a car rental company that is using AI scanners that seem to overcharge for minor scuffs and scrapes, and lots more to discuss this week. So let's get into the headlines.
Newsfeed.
Well, despite the considerable national security concerns that led to a 2024 law requiring TikTok to stop operating in the U.S., the White House has just launched its very own TikTok account. Their first post, unsurprisingly, was all about Trump, accompanied by dramatic music saying, "Every day I wake up determined to deliver a better life for the people across this nation. I am your voice." Given that Trump currently has about a minus 14% net negative approval rating, I am not sure that this is exactly what the people of TikTok want.
Yeah, and so we've covered this story as it's evolved, but for anyone listening who wants some background, basically a law was made in the U.S. in 2024 that required the U.S. TikTok app to stop operating in the United States by January 19th, 2025, unless its Chinese owner ByteDance basically sold it or sold off the U.S. part of it at least. Now, Trump was actually the one who started all of this in his first term. He labeled TikTok as a security risk, banned it on government devices. Then in 2020, requested that the entire app be removed from the United States. So what has changed since then, you may ask? Essentially, I'd say Trump's 2024 presidential campaign, which leveraged his TikTok presence to win over a lot of young voters to his side, which probably helped him win the presidency. He's since extended that deadline from January to April, then to mid-June, and now it's in mid-September 2025, all the while assuring us that there's a long lineup of companies who are very interested in taking over the app in the States, which kind of seems like it would have happened by now if there were a long list of companies.
Speaking of Trump, we've talked about his incoherent tariff regime that he's ensured Americans will somehow make them richer. And one of the latest effects is that Sony has just announced it will raise the price of PlayStation 5 consoles in the U.S. by about $50 because of those tariffs, noting that there will be no similar price changes for non-U.S. markets.
Yeah, and we've had our own tariff announcement right here in Canada recently with the Prime Minister Mark Carney removing retaliatory tariffs on goods subject to CUSMA, which is the Canada-US-Mexico Free Trade Agreement. Now, I've always thought these counter tariffs were a deeply impotent way to pretend we're accomplishing something positive relative to this trade war. It's been totally head-scratching for me to hear the Prime Minister and other Canadian leaders tell the U.S. that Trump's tariffs are just going to make things more expensive for Americans, and then turn around to do the exact same thing to Canadians. And that's not the only issue. Beyond that, CUSMA, where we complain that Trump is breaking an agreement he signed and can't be trusted, only to have us then break the same agreement ourselves. So, this is course correction for me. And, elbows up is all well and good when it comes to Canadian consumer boycotts of U.S. products and things like that. But you're just shooting yourself in the foot when it comes to Canada breaking trade agreements and imposing our own tariffs because we're just adopting the techniques of the person we're trying to criticize. And it doesn't make us look good. It doesn't accomplish much. And so I'm very happy to see at least some of them go away.
I will say this sounds like it could be an entire podcast episode on its own. Will be interesting to see if this moves the needle on Carney's talks with Trump, which, of course, is the main goal here. Now, our next story relates to cars, one of the areas where Canadian tariffs remain. But thankfully, the story has nothing to do with tariffs. Rather, it's Hertz's use of artificial intelligence to scan vehicles before and after they're rented to assess any damages. They're using these Israeli startup Uvaze tech, which interestingly was originally intended to scan vehicles for explosives as part of Israeli security efforts. Unfortunately, this implementation so far of this technology hasn't been going all that smoothly. There have been a number of stories online of customers complaining about being charged outrageous fees for what is very minor damages, like just scrapes on a tire. That's the one I was reading.
That's the one that really stands out. There are a bunch of these online, but the guy who rented a Volkswagen in Atlanta returned it with a 1-inch scuff on the side of one of the tires within minutes of dropping off his car and getting it scanned by the AI. I think that place in Atlanta was the first place in the States to get this scanning stuff for Hertz. Within minutes of dropping off the car, the AI sent him a bill for $440 for a scuff on the side of one of the tires. And listen to the breakdown if you think this is outrageous. So, and it just shows how deeply advantaged we're going to be taken advantage of if we let AI companies keep going down this path. So there's $250 to repair the 1-inch scuff on your tire, which is bad enough because it doesn't need to be repaired. On top of that, a $125 fee for processing, on top of an additional $65 administrative fee. And like, what kind of Orwellian nonsense is this? You've removed reasonable human inspections, replaced them with a robot that demands almost $200 in processing and administrative fees when it finds something wrong. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And on top of that, which is this is how it's going to work, Hertz offered him a discount if he paid within 7 days. And I think basically trying to keep people from pursuing the matter, right? So, pay within 7 days. I think it was $50 off within 2 days and some smaller amount within 7 days. When the driver actually decided to find out more about the charge and see if he could fight it, he was pushed through Hertz's chatbot-only damage claim system, which prevents human agents from engaging directly with customers and instead pushes through a claim into the system. And a human agent will then respond within 10 days. Now, you'll note that 10 days is several days after when he could get the discount. And so, again, this is exactly what companies are going to do to all of us with AI in these situations if we let them. We're going to end up being passed around from chatbot to chatbot until we give up in total human exhaustion against the tide of AI.
This seems like a perfect example of what is going to happen. Like you said, where finally they get in touch with a human at the end of this line. And the human has the insight and the context to be able to say, you know what, that scrape's not a big deal. We're going to remove any charges. And all of a sudden, everybody's just spent weeks and weeks dealing with this, what didn't have to be a problem in the first place.
Absolutely.
So really hard to be optimistic about stories like this when we're talking about efficiencies in AI, because that was not efficient whatsoever. In other news, that's hard to be optimistic about. Meta's new chief AI officer, Alexander Wang, has just announced it's licensing Midjourney's AI image and video generator. Wang was part of Meta's recent enormous AI spending spree, and his company Scale AI, which many people have probably heard of, was acquired by Meta for almost $15 billion. Now, it's hard not to see this further contributing to the amount of slop that Meta's AI app has been producing. And it also it's worth noting that Midjourney is currently being sued by Disney and Universal for IP violations, with those companies calling it a quote, bottomless pit of plagiarism. So in some ways, I feel like that might be the perfect fit and marriage for a company like Meta.
I think you're about right, really. And we covered some of that before. Meta also has more unwelcome news with one of their former project managers who's accused the company of cheating advertisers and purposely doing an end run around Apple's privacy protection in order to keep tracking users, even when the agreement with Apple says it will not do that. And he claims he was fired for bringing up these issues internally multiple times. And what do you think Meta says? Oh, no, this is not right. He was fired for other reasons. These things don't happen. So just the level of trust that you can put in these companies is vanishingly low.
It is unbelievably low. Now, in other news of companies behaving badly, we have talked recently about Tesla's court order, the court case that they lost a couple of weeks ago, where Tesla was caught being purposefully misleading and outright lying. Now, the U.S. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which already has multiple open investigations into Tesla, is opening a new one to investigate Tesla's inconsistent driver assistance crash reports, which Tesla usually receives within minutes of a crash, but for some reason often takes months to provide to anyone else, even though they are legally required to do just that. Tesla, of course, like most of the tech giants these days, has claimed that was just a simple error that's since been fixed, Jeff.
Yeah, I don't know why they think that this is a good approach, because they're basically admitting that they're constantly making tons of errors, and they're asking for a level of confidence in the consumer that is not reflected in their ability not to have errors like this. So, and, keep in mind, this is the company with the same leadership of X, which has just settled a $500 million class action suit from when Musk decided he'd come in and lay off, I think it was almost 60% of Twitter's employees without paying agreed upon severance and things like that. It's the same leader as SpaceX, who, as we talked a bit about, I think it was last week, around the Starlink satellite service, the SpaceX has said they'll be asking basically the president to reject several U.S. states' broadband grant applications because those states don't want to use SpaceX's Starlink satellite service. And at this point, even Musk's own fanboys are starting to turn on him a bit, and especially around Musk's weird obsession with AI sex bots and the like. And speaking of which, we finally watched the Mountainhead movie last night, and there are some great tech things in that, but man, do they ever have a solid take on Musk with their Venn character there. And I think it's so close to true, it's just scary.
Yeah, Mountainhead is worth a watch if you want to see what is not meant to be a documentary, but like we were texting over the past 24 hours, really is like a documentary of the tech bros of today. So a great way to spend some time if you're looking for a bit of a parody on the world of tech bros. Now, in other unfortunate news, Oracle is going to be building an AI data center in Texas, and it's planning to spend more than $1 billion a year. I had to double check this number, powering it with gas generators. Jeff talks about AI and the environment coming up next in The Other Mac.
The Other Mac.
You may remember in 2008 when Oracle's then CEO and now CTO Larry Ellison called cloud computing, I quote, complete gibberish. Well, fast forward 17 years and what used to be a database company has become one of the world's major cloud service providers. The AI boom has exploded the demand for data centers, and Oracle, which provides services for many companies, including TikTok, from whom Oracle makes $1 billion of revenue each year, Oracle recently partnered to provide OpenAI with 4.5 gigawatts of computing power. To put that into perspective, 1 gigawatt is enough energy to power about 750,000 US homes, so OpenAI's 4.5 gigawatts is almost enough to power all the homes in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, according to an expose at Bloomberg, it looks like Oracle is in such a rush to power AI that it's in at least one case building a 1.4 gigawatt data center in Texas, for which it's going to spend $1 billion per year powering with gas generators instead of waiting to be connected to the grid. It's exactly according to plan implemented by some of the worst people in the world that the environment has faded from people's considerations in the face of all the other craziness that's going on, and even as we experienced unprecedented wildfires and weather events. And it's one thing to knowingly harm the environment to accomplish goals that are essential for human life and safety, but burning large cities' worth of fossil fuels so incels can create AI deepfake porn in their basements, while irresponsible tech companies shove AI down our throats to no constructive end other than to further enrich themselves, is just crazy. As another example, just earlier this year, Elon Musk's xAI built its Colossus supercomputer in Memphis, Tennessee, and it's become one of the biggest air polluters in the United States. This supercomputer powers Musk's Grok chatbot, and the company has plans to further expand it. Now, with typical disregard for anyone or anything else, xAI secretly installed 35 portable methane gas turbines, enormously polluting and big enough to power an entire city, without any permits at all. When discovered, xAI assured the mayor of Memphis that it was only using 15 of those, but surprise, surprise, thermal imaging showed that more than twice that many were in use. Now, OpenAI won't talk about how much energy ChatGPT-5 uses, but it's been estimated that it uses over 8 times more than ChatGPT-4. In fact, it's estimated that the electricity consumed by data centers all around the world will be over 1,000 terawatt hours by 2026, which puts them between the energy usage of the entire countries of Japan and Russia. So that's a lot of energy. Now, I've talked about nuclear power on the show before, and frankly, if we're going to insist on squandering so much power on mostly useless AI, then nuclear is probably the only responsible choice. Indeed, Microsoft, Google, Meta, and others have decided to pursue this to some degree, but the pace of adoption is still slow. And AI is now growing faster than grid capacities and faster than renewable energy grows, so there doesn't seem to be a much better option than essentially going nuclear. And note that all of the discussion so far totally ignores the environmental impacts of the materials used to make data centers, which makes the situation even worse. So, in conclusion, it's bad enough that AI companies steal copyrighted materials, fill our feeds with slop, replace human workers with inferior chatbots, and pollute our minds with AI lies and hallucinations. But we do need to make some room on the list of complaints to include the extraordinary damage they're doing to the environment and ask ourselves if those benefits are worth the costs. You can fully expect a very different answer from the billionaire tech bros, investor addicts, and political grifters than any rational person would hopefully provide. I'm the other Mac.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Don Lenihan is president and CEO of Middle Ground Policy Research. He also writes a weekly column for National Newswatch on the political implications of artificial intelligence. Don recently wrote an article about Canada's race for sovereign AI, and Amber spoke to Don about this news and what it means for the future of our country. Here's their conversation.
AI Spotlight.
Don, thank you so much for joining me. I want to chat a little bit more about this deal that the federal government just signed with the Canadian AI startup called Cohere. This company is one that I'm very familiar with, but perhaps our listeners are not. What should Canadians know about Cohere, and what should they know about this announcement as well?
Well, given that Cohere is maybe playing an important role here, I certainly hope it is. Maybe I'll start by just saying a few things, a few facts about it. That's useful. It's a pretty sizable organization. It's about, I think, valued at almost $7 billion. Its main offices are in Toronto and co-offices actually in San Francisco. It is a multinational, but a Canadian company based in Canada. And let me just say this: it's what's really important here is it's the only Canadian company that really at scale is producing generative AI, and I just mean chatbots, right? That are big enough and powerful enough to do some real work. And we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, but that's a good thing for Canada. There are lots of other chatbots in the world, from everything from ChatGPT to Grok to Claude and so on. But this is a Canadian version. Maybe I should just also say that it's been tested, I think, in 37 different languages. So, and this company also, Cohere, has a large enterprise platform. And that means they not only have a chatbot, they have a tool, a platform for making it available to business. They specialize in supporting business. And that tool is a pretty sophisticated piece of machinery that will support a lot of activity by large and small businesses.
And I think it's fair to add that this company is a darling in the tech community in Canada right now. And I use that word because I think back to the days of Shopify when everybody's eyes were pointed towards Shopify. I think we feel that a little bit with Cohere. What was just announced, just so people have some context around the relationship between Cohere and the federal government?
Yeah, so the federal government just announced a, memorandum of understanding, and it was just signed, I think, last week, if I'm not mistaken. It's a non-binding agreement, and it's really the first step. It's important because for a couple of reasons. But first of all, it's aimed at the public service, and this is very much in Cohere's space. So what the government wants Cohere to do is basically explore how sovereign AI can strengthen services. So this is about looking in there and seeing whether the tools they have, they can provide the public service with ways of using AI to transform how they deliver and use services, and at the same time promoting the development of digital sovereignty. And again, we'll probably talk more about that. Let me just say this is really important to the government. Everybody probably knows by now that the government thinks it's going to withdraw to some extent from our Canadian embrace on trade and other things, and do it by launching or rebuilding the Canadian economy, and AI is seen as a powerful driver for that. And digital sovereignty means we're not just talking about Canadians' traditional political sovereignty. We want tools, or the government wants tools, that are sovereign in the sense that they are ruled by Canadian law and that they are Canadian tools living on Canadian soil. So our data is living on Canadian soil and operating on Canadian soil. So I think that's a big part of what this MOU is about, is exploring the possibilities, starting with the public service and certainly working out into the private sector and so on, and hoping to begin to ground that idea of expansion of the use of AI and of digital sovereignty, first in the public service and out into Canadian businesses.
When we think about sovereign AI, in a recent article that you wrote, you said, and I'm going to quote you here, a sovereign AI stack must reflect Canadian values. What exactly do you mean by that?
It's a great question. And values here. First of all, people right now in the at least particularly in the American AI community, but in the AI community around the world, there's nervousness about values. It makes it sound like, especially when government says it out loud, it makes it sound like they want the AI to reflect the government's agenda. I want to say that the government, or that values and a commitment to values, need not be a handbrake on the development of AI. Indeed, it can be a real asset. And I think we need to understand as well that we're sort of, and that Canada's kind of steering a middle course on this between the two different extremes right now. On one hand, there's the United States under Donald Trump, and they have taken and are taking a really deregulation approach. The idea from the industry is we don't want you controlling our innovation and controlling and slowing us down. Right now, speed is everything. So please get your hands off our industry. And Donald Trump seems quite inclined to do that. At the other extreme, or at least further over on the other side, is the European Union, which has been much more inclined to be concerned about, I guess I would say, the risks associated with AI, the uncertainties, whether it has to do with privacy or whether it has to do with loss of control of AI or all kinds of other things. And so there's a very strong kind of regulatory approach, at least relatively speaking, in the EU. And it's interesting, here in Canada, we may have started out a little bit more in that direction, but this government, I think, is taking a kind of middle ground course. And Evan Solomon, the Minister for AI, has this phrase, light, tight, right regulation. And I'll just take a second to tell you what that means. By light, he certainly recognizes that there's no point in burdening industry. And where things are relatively clear and we think that the risks are low, then we should try to get things on the road. So basically, we should look for safe settings and move them forward. Tight, on the other hand, recognizes that lots of things are not that way. Our privacy concerns over our data, our concerns over essentially the protection of Canadian interests and Canadian data within our organizations like Heritage Canada or Health Canada or places like that are important. And in that case, regulation needs to be firm enough and needs to be strong enough. And the right thing is really to say, regulation should make sense to people. If we can't understand why it's there, then we probably are going down the wrong path. So the government thinks it's steering this middle ground between the two extremes. It doesn't want to deregulate wholly, and on the other hand, it doesn't want to go too far to burden industry with that slows down innovation or slows down investment.
I think it's fair to say that neither of us could speak on behalf of the U.S. in terms of why they are moving towards this direction of deregulation. But as people who are observing and reporting on what's happening in the AI space, it is pretty clear to me that we need regulation. We've seen what happens when there's no guardrails in place around AI. Every single day I wake up, and I'm sure you have the same experience, there's a story about a chat bot going rogue. There's stories about privacy issues when it comes to our data and these big AI models. So what would be the thinking in terms of more deregulation? I mean, this could only in the long term really hurt and impact everyday users and businesses.
Well, first of all, that goes back to what I said about the fact that values are not necessarily a handbrake. They actually can be a facilitator of development. And the I think one of the things that's hugely underestimated right now, particularly in Canada, or it's underestimated, let's say it's a wild card, is Canada has one of the lowest rates of confidence in AI in developed countries in the world. And people are nervous. They are nervous about chatbots going rogue. They are nervous about loss of control over privacy. They are nervous about losing jobs. They're nervous about all kinds of things they don't know where AI is going to land. And I think a certain amount of regulation is from their point of view, and I think appropriately, absolutely in order. I want to make sure that my data is secure. I want to make sure that that the chatbots that they're putting on the market are safe and they're not going to lead to AI psychosis or some other thing with my children, and so on and so on. So basically, what I would say is I want to add one more thing that I think is a really important driver for understanding what's happening in the United States. Is they're probably more inclined to be deregulatory than we are to begin with. But there is this other wild card in there right now, and it's China. China is developing artificial intelligence extremely rapidly. They're very competent, very good models, and getting better all the time. And there is a sense in the AI community in Silicon Valley, rightly or wrongly, that we're getting close to some threshold with this stuff. And if we break through to some place like artificial general intelligence, whoever gets there first is going to have a huge leap ahead of everyone else, both economically and potentially geopolitically. And so the argument in the States right now, very powerfully inside the White House and very influentially, is we can't afford to lose this race, and it is a race. And it's not just a race about dominating world markets, it's a race about geopolitical control. And so lots of those people believe, rightly or wrongly, that if they don't move ahead very quickly, the risks are there, but they're going to face a deeper risk, and that risk will be controlled by another country, and that country starts with a C.
Absolutely, and it's not Canada.
Definitely it's not Canada.
I want to also bring up something that you wrote in the article where you said the public service is Solomon's sandbox. Again, for people who don't know Evan Solomon and his role, he's Canada's Minister of AI. This is the first time we've had that role in place. Talk a little bit about what this move could mean for the public service here in Canada and potentially a more efficient government.
Well, in terms of a more efficient government, and I'm a guy who's been involved in sort of public service reform most of my career and seen this through a number of lenses, including the very early sort of digital tools when they came online in so-called e-government, electronic government. And this is the latest version of that is AI. I guess I would just say this. Certainly, the way the tools are developing, there are lots of opportunities inside the public service to streamline services. We all know what wait times are like. In fact, maybe I'm going to take a flyer here, Amber, and just take this in a slightly different direction. I think one of the things that is hugely important for things like more effective and efficient control and management of organizations, big organizations, that AI offers that's not well appreciated. It's not just about automating processes. It is about that, and very efficiently if it's done well, but there's a bigger gain here. When we're thinking about trying to manage and plan and organize and reform something as big as, for example, the healthcare system, it's a humongously large beast with many nooks and crannies and many big rooms that we don't even know what is in there. And what I mean by that is when we try to reform it, we go out and talk to a bunch of different people, most of whom it's like the story of the elephant, where everybody has a part of it. One person has a hold of the trunk and they think you got to fix the trunk, and somebody else has a hold of the tail and they think you got to fix the tail. And nobody's got the picture of the elephant as a whole. AI gives us the prospect. It's almost like an MRI. I'm mixing my metaphors here, but that's okay. It's almost like an MRI, is we do have the capacity to develop a tool where we could look and see inside the system as a whole in a much more efficient, effective, and reliable way so that we could see where the real roadblocks are, where the bottlenecks are, where the things that need to be done. And we could see with a degree of reliability and evidence that will allow us to do diagnosis of the problems and improve those systems much more efficiently. My real hope is that that's kind of the big wild card that we haven't got yet that's close. And it would allow us to start managing those organizations at a whole new level and with a new level of clarity and insight. And it would also then begin to undermine, or I just sort of say short circuit, the arguments back and forth between the guy holding the tail and the guy holding the trunk. As suddenly we realize they're actually connected to something bigger here, and we see how all the pieces fit together.
I think it's probably fair to say that all of us want this to happen. I mean, most Canadians would want us to move in this direction, of course, with guardrails in place. But at the same time, I think there is a little bit of fear around Canada being able to move quickly enough. And I'm reminded of many years ago, back in 2018, I had a chance to interview Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, talking to him about AI and having very similar conversations that we are having now, like Canada can be a leader. We need to adopt artificial intelligence. And it strikes me that as much as we all need to move in this direction, I guess my question is, are we able to do so? And if I can steal sort of three words like the Minister of AI is using and talk about time, tech, and team, do we have time to make this happen? And what kind of time do we have? Is it the right time for the right technology with a partnership like Cohere? And is Carney's team the right team to make this happen? So, I guess that time, tech, and team question is something that I hope is right now in 2025, because clearly we've been talking about this for many, many years. I mean, we're talking a decade or more.
Well, let me say something about the time to start with. I was going to say people may have different views on this, but I'm not sure they do. I think most of the people who are involved in this discussion are pretty much of the same view, is we've never seen a technology move so fast. And it is evolving very quickly. Whatever people say about how long it's taking to manifest and get sort of anchored in business and change businesses, or government for that matter, and these things do take time, it is moving very fast. And I'm thinking, when we think about what are our goals here, let's remember that our goals, at least with this government right now, aren't just to improve services. They're ultimately to reestablish economic sovereignty. We see this as a very important tool for where we're going with our future. And if that's our goal, if that's one of our overarching goals, then I would say time is utterly of the essence. And the reason for that is actually pretty simple and pretty brutal, is that the markets aren't going to give us much time. If you look at the amount of money that's being invested right now in the United States through big companies like Google and Microsoft and OpenAI and so on, in this technology, both in the infrastructure, that is to say, in the digital, the data centers that will be used to train the tools, and of course to drive them out and deliver services, and in terms of the models themselves, Grok or ChatGPT or whatever it is, we are talking hundreds of billions of dollars per year, moving toward the trillions by the 2030. Like, that is a huge amount of money, a huge amount of money. And they are using that money right now to build a whole new layer of infrastructure that by any stretch more than rivals what we thought we were doing with railroads in the 1870s. We are going to build over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years a new global infrastructure, and it's already underway. And I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit long-winded here, but the point is, if Canada wants to be a player in this game, a sovereign player, as opposed to renting someone else's space on their systems, then we need bots. Let's say we need the models, and Cohere has a model, so we do have one there. And we need the infrastructure. And it turns out there is infrastructure being built in Canada, Bell Canada and TELUS and others. TELUS has now announced a $70 billion investment in developing centers. So a stack, what we call a stack is really the number of things that you need to stack on top of each other, the technology, to make it truly sovereign. You need essentially the infrastructure at the bottom, the data centers. You need the tools, and you need the apps at the top. We can, I think, build that. We don't have it yet in Canada, but we have a very limited amount of time before we get swamped by a huge amount of building going on elsewhere, including China. And we only have one company that's building models, right? And only a couple that are building infrastructure. So to go back to your time question, here's what I would say is if we truly think we're trying to build a sovereign infrastructure and we want to re-ground Canadian sovereignty in AI, among other things, we probably have a 3 or 4 year window at most, and we don't have those kind of resources, but we have some. So is it going to work? I don't know. Maybe this takes me to the thing about the tools. And I guess I've already talked about that a little bit. All I would say is we have to build those tools and we have to build them quickly. And that raises all kinds of questions. It raises questions among people who fear that we will move too fast, too quickly, and not regulate properly, or that we don't have the resources, the electricity and other things to run these things, or that they're an environmental risk, or that our models are not safe. So if that slows us down, the window will close. And finally, I guess your question about the team, whether you're talking about the political team or the capacity we have in terms of AI engineers and designers and other things. Canada is smart in AI. We are good. We're small, but we're very good. So we do have something to leverage. And we have a government now that seems to be genuinely interested and committed in doing this. All that leads me to say, and that's what I tried to write in the piece, is I think the government is doing exactly what it should be doing. It's trying to put together a Canadian stack. It's trying to pull it together as quickly as possible, and it's trying to get it out to market. Will we do it in time? Will that be enough even if we do? I think only time will tell. My last and closing thought on that is just to put a punctuation mark on that. The wave that's coming in this stuff is huge. It is huge.
I think up until this point in the conversation, I agree 100% with everything that you're saying in terms of the direction that we need to move, the team that we have, the technology, all those pieces, and bringing the public on for the ride, so to speak, for the lack of a better word. But the one piece that I think is going to be a problem is trust. And I know that you wrote an article where you talked about this earlier on this summer, and you said building this kind of trust requires more than technical safeguards. It means treating deep public concerns not as a communications problem, but as a democratic obligation to engage and inform. And this is especially true in this age of misinformation and disinformation and this lack of trust that we're seeing when it comes to large institutions. So is there any way to repair trust on this path to sovereign AI?
Yeah. I'm a moderate, a cautious optimist here. I certainly think there is. And I'll start out by reminding you what I said before, is that Canadians have the lowest score in developed countries with respect to their trust in AI. So the good news, if there's good news here, is we haven't got much further down to go, right? There's nowhere to go but up. And I would say two things, is that first of all, there's sort of the policy side, I could say, or the organizational side. And that's about things that shouldn't surprise anybody. What people need to see and what we need to make sure we build into the development of AI and its use, whether private or public, with as far as we can in the private, is openness, transparency, and accountability. People need to know what these things can do. They need to know where they're working. They need to know how they operate. And I'm not talking about getting into the guts of a chatbot or some other thing. I'm just talking about basic understanding of how they're being used and what they're being used for and what they're doing, and some idea of how they're being held to how the bots themselves or the AI itself is being held to account. How are we checking on it and making sure that we're overseeing what it's doing? And I think it's critical at both a private sector level and certainly at a public level that there is a deep commitment to openness, transparency, and accountability. I do not see that in the United States. It seems to be going the other way. And I think that's a very worrying development because that will certainly raise questions about trust. In fact, I'm going to throw one other thing in here. Um, there has not yet, thank God, been an AI disaster or catastrophe, whether that's somebody, some terrorist using it to create some kind of viral some kind of terrible virus, or whether it's some kind of cyber attack, or whether it's some kind of incredible rogue bot. But we will see one. We will see one. And when we do, if it's not that far in the future, that's the sort of thing that could have a huge impact on people's level of trust. If they don't think they know what's going on or why this happened or what's being done about it, they may very quickly react very negatively against AI. And that's brewing out there. It could happen. Second thing I'm going to say is that openness, transparency, and accountability are critical, but so is public literacy. I think the government should make a big effort to inform and educate the public on AI. And my own experience, and I'm not trying to speak down to people, is people are not very informed about this, including people who are very informed about all kinds of other things. There are lots of people who are very sophisticated and very active in politics and public policy and so on, who know a lot about government and a lot about policy and a lot about economics, but know almost nothing about AI. And I will add this: most of these people think AI is technology, or the issues are technology. I would argue a lot of these issues increasingly are not about the technology at all. The engineers are pretty good. We can trust them to build it. What we really want to know is what are we doing with it and how is it being used? And I think the public, we shouldn't be trying to teach them how to build a chatbot. We should try to be teaching them to understand what they do and how they impact us and how we can manage those relationships better. The last thing in closing, you've probably heard all this discussion lately about AI psychosis, people extremely worried that their kids and others are getting absorbed in the chatbots, and the chatbots are going rogue and turning into vampires or bad boyfriends or girlfriends or whatever, and that lots of people are emotionally vulnerable on this. That's surely true. I'm not here to talk a lot about AI psychosis. What I am here to say is what we should realize is that we should be arming people with the tools to protect them, not even protect themselves, manage those relationships and understand how those bots work so that the bot doesn't become a rogue bot. A lot has to do, it's going to sound weird. It's a lot like your dog. If you don't train it well, it might bite you. And if you do know how to work with them well, they're highly unlikely to bite you.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the literacy point that you just made, because a few months ago I was at a dinner with some pretty well-known business leaders in Canada, and I had suggested that the government should do more when it comes to educating Canadians and try to improve the literacy around AI. I want to say 8 out of 10 people at the table kind of laughed at this comment and said, you know, this is not the government's job. But I'm probably seeing a bit of what you're seeing as someone who's out there in the public all the time, speaking to people about AI, is that the average person doesn't really understand how some of these things work, and even how to incorporate them into their businesses as well. I mean, look at all the small businesses in Canada that could be much more efficient. So do you think that is the government's role? Is there something tactical that we could do on this side?
I absolutely think it's the government role, although I would draw a distinction here, at least tentatively, between the business community and sort of public safety and well-being. I think it's one thing to say, should they be out there training business on how to use AI and how to integrate it into their businesses? And Evan Solomon surely is dealing with this question. He's expected to encourage it. I think Evan Solomon should be encouraging it and giving speeches, but I think there are lots of people in your business and obviously consultants and others who can help business people once they believe they have a reason to look into it, who can help them understand how to integrate it into their business. And that probably is more of a technological question. So I'm not saying the government has nothing to do there, but I don't see that as the government's job. I think our concerns over AI psychosis or AI taking over or losing our jobs or all sorts of other things that helping people understand how AI is going to, how it's already being integrated into our society and how it's going to change our society and how we need to adapt, I think absolutely is a government responsibility. It's about our health and well-being.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to see more happening on that front as well. And it is probably also increasingly my assumption that when I talk about the Canadian public, there are just such a large number of entrepreneurs that I feel like it's, there's an overlap there between the business owners and the average Canadian as well. One final question for you. You mentioned that you are cautiously optimistic. uh, Day to day, are you more optimistic about Canada being able to achieve what we need to achieve when it comes to sovereign AI? And do you think that we will be able to do this in the time that is required?
Well, I think about that question every day. I really do, like many times a day. Um, so if I give you an answer now, if you call me in 5 minutes, I might give you a different one. I'll be really candid here and have to say I'm deeply ambivalent because it is such a steep hill to climb. And what makes it such a steep hill to climb is that the timeline here is very short. Like we've probably got 3 or 4 years, and that we have never seen anything built this fast and this big in history. Nothing like it. And it is so powerful in terms of when we get that infrastructure in place, it will change the way we do a huge amount of stuff. And we're so small compared to some of like those guys are spending hundreds of billions of dollars a year. They will, like just the other day in Meta, Mark Zuckerberg announced that he's building a couple of new data centers. One is two-thirds the size of Manhattan. It's big enough to power, I think it was 5 million homes. Now think about this for a second. This is to train one bot. And now they will also use it for other purposes, but when they train these things, they are using hundreds of thousands, and as the scaling is going to scale to several hundred thousands of these of the chips, and these chips are like really powerful things to build one AI. Um, so I'm not sure. When I think about it that way, I look and sort of say, what kind of resources does Canada really have for this? And it makes me a little nervous. And I would also say the last thing is the competition up there is very aggressive, and especially because big American organizations like Google and Microsoft and others are competing with the Chinese, and they see themselves as doing that, and they want those world markets. They know what's coming, and they want to dominate those markets, and the government wants them to as well. And that means if we're standing in their way, they will certainly try to chew us up very quickly. I hate to be mean and ugly here, but they will. They have their business will be to buy out their competition, and we are a very small competitor. So they'll look at the Canadian market and say, "Do we want that market? Of course we do, right? Of course we want that market." And so, how many billions of dollars will it take to get it? To go back to Mark Zuckerberg again, last couple of weeks, he was recruiting his whole new AI team, and he was taking these people in their 20s. And the highest offer for one of these people over 5 years was $1 billion for somebody in their 20s to come and work for him with him for 5 years. That's the kind of money these people are able to spend and will spend. And I'm not against them, right? I'm not against them. I'm just overwhelmed.
I'm a little against them only because I think they operate without guardrails, and that's at the detriment to the average person who's interacting with this technology. So to me, it feels like the Canadian opportunity is also one that we talked about off the top of the interview, which is to build AI with Canadian values. And those are values of respect and trust and equality or equity. I mean, we can, I think, do that. We just need about a dozen more coheres versus just one. That would be helpful too.
And
For
I
people who
would say a few very big angel investors.
Yes, yes, yes. We need both of those things and probably lots more. For people who want to read more about your work on AI, I know you're writing every week on this subject. Where's the best place for them to go?
They'll find me at National Newswatch. I'm usually posted up there uh, sometime during the week, usually Tuesday or Wednesday. So the column's there, and I hope people will come and read it.
Excellent, Don. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Amber.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
There's a lot of new and exciting technology to choose from during the back-to-school season, which can be overwhelming for parents and kids alike during this busy time of the year. To get back to basics, Amber has these 4 essential picks for students this September.
Talking Tech.
Thanks, Jeff. I've been thinking a lot about back to school. My son is heading off into grade 11. My first pick is for better Wi-Fi for studying and streaming. Whether your child is away at university or still living at home, the TP-Link Archer BE400 Wi-Fi 7 router is a fast and secure option for better internet connectivity. This means students of all ages can meet all their homework and assignment deadlines without worrying about a stable connection. The Tether app, which I love, makes managing your home network easy, including parental controls to better oversee screen time access and time limits for different online devices. Next up, for smarter printing for school projects and forms. The HP Office Jet Pro 8135E delivers great color and crisp black text, perfect for school presentations, reports, and more. Thanks to the HP Smart app, printing documents from the palm of your hand is easy with this wireless all-in-one printer. You can also pair your printer with HP Instant Ink, a smart subscription service that automatically detects when you're running low and delivers ink straight to your door. For parents, this means more convenience, less waste, and less stress during the busy school year. Now for an AI-ready laptop for on-the-go learning. Best Buy Canada is the ultimate destination for the latest and greatest tech for students. Place your order online for pickup at a store near you, and you will get your order ready for pickup in as little as 1 hour. One of my top picks from Best Buy's Back to School guide is the Asus ZenBook A14 14-inch Copilot Plus laptop. This device is lighter than air, weighing less than 1 kilogram. And finally, I love this real-time location alert app for student safety. It's called Life 360. We've been using this in my home now for the past couple of years, so I can always track when my son gets to school safe and gets back home safely as well.
Thanks, Amber, and thanks all of you for tuning into the show. We've really enjoyed sharing new episodes with you every week this summer, and we've got lots more in store for what we know will be a very busy fall. Remember, you can check out all our segments over on YouTube anytime, and please let us know what you think on social media.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.